Good afternoon, good early evening. I'm Brandon Risette. I'm with Maryland State Department of Education. I am the Technology Accessibility Specialist. We kind of put this together over the last couple of weeks as a basic introduction, some accessibility Q&A. I have about 16 slides. We don't have to go through all of them, but I'm going to cover some of the basics that are also covered in the video. If you want to interrupt, please interrupt at any time. This is more of a discussion than a presentation, and I'd rather take it down that route. So when I think about accessibility, I really think about it not as much about disability, but really about ability and what some person can do or what individuals can do. So really, we want to afford every individual the same opportunity. And it's not as much equality as it is equity. So when we really look at it, we want to provide equitable access so that I'm not doing something that someone else cannot do. Now, there are exceptions to that. There are things that we cannot replicate without physically doing it. One example is asking somebody to draw an image. There's no way to change hand drawing. There's no easy way to replicate that on a computer. Replicate that without using a stylus or some other device. So there are things that impact accessibility. So when we look at it, why does accessibility matter? And these numbers kind of stand out to me when you look at basically 20% of the population in the US has a disability. To put that in perspective for our students, and I had to dig to find this number, but 13.7% of students enrolled in either elementary or secondary schools have at least one disability. So this is only accounting for one. And when I look at that number, I would imagine it's actually higher than reported. And the reason I would say that is because you think about younger children, you typically don't have that number right away of students that have a disability. A lot of them are going through testing still to determine their disability. And then there is also a large portion of the population that wants to prevent or hold off on labeling their child for as long as possible. So, it might only be 15%, but that's still a lot of students have a disability. So when we talk about accessibility, this is a pretty common image looking at equality and equity. They throw the third image in, and I'm going to describe the image and kind of model what I would do for an accessible presentation. So the first image is three individuals attempting to watch a soccer game through a fence or with a barrier of a fence. Each one's given a box. The first one doesn't need the box, still uses the box and can see over it. The second one is able to see over the fence with the assistance of the box. The third student cannot see over the fence with one box. That would be equality. The middle image, now we're talking about equity. The first student who didn't need the box has given that box to the student that needs it. So the third student who could not see over the fence with one box now can see over the fence with two boxes. So we've equipped them with the tools they need. That's equity. And now when we talk about accessibility, it's really about stripping away those barriers. Well, we would love to strip away all the barriers. It's never going to happen. So in this image, we've lessened the barrier. No longer is it a wooden fence that you can't see through. Now it's a chain link fence. All three students can actually stand and watch the game. Two of them see over the fence, one of them sees through the fence. That's the idea of accessibility, allowing the user to natively modify the situation. And in this case, well, instead of trying to see over the fence, they see under the bar and through the fence. Not perfect, but better than nothing. So that's my general spiel on what accessibility is. And now when we look at why we do it, and I am not a legal professional. This is not legal advice. This is not anything but my understanding of the law and how it's written. So Section 508 governs most of what we do. And Section 508 only applies to executive branch agencies or people that receive executive branch funding. Most school systems receive federal funding. And this requires that all electronic information and technology be accessible to users with disability. So if you ever read Section 508 prior to 2017, not very easy to understand. What happened in 2017, really effective in 18, was they incorporated something known as the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, the WCAG 2.0. Federally, the level is WCAG 2.0 level AA. That is the federal requirement. Now, when we talk about the state and what is required for the state, there's actually two pieces of COMAR that directly reference WCAG and Section 508. The first is digital learning. These are for your online courses, fully online, so that don't meet the 80-20 rule. So they have more than 80% of their content is delivered asynchronously. They are required to go through an accessibility review with me. They're your CPD and your student courses, online student courses also have to go through that. So I might have flipped a couple things there. Let me just backtrack. Online CPD courses that are more than 80%, yes, more than 80% asynchronous have to be reviewed by me to be approved for accessibility. All student online courses that meet that same standard, that are not blended, that are fully asynchronous, have to go through the same process as well. So our student courses and our CPD courses. The second part is the one that really puts the onus on our school systems and really requires more work for the locals than it does for me. And it also changed the state standards from WCAG 2.0 to WCAG 2.1 level AA. So this went into effect almost a year ago, that each local board of education is supposed to train a group of people. And then also when you purchase or select digital learning resources, they must meet WCAG 2.1 level AA. This is a huge lift right now for all the local school systems, because you really have to look at each individual piece and determine if it is accessible. That is the law. Are there any questions about anything that I just said? Okay. So I'm going to talk briefly about the WCAG, or the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. The reason I don't ever refer to Section 508 is because the WCAG is incorporated directly into Section 508. And it actually provides a stable rubric that can be measured, that any content or any tool can be measured against. There's a set of goals, and then there's actual success criteria with techniques of how to do it. And it just makes it clear. I mean, one of them talks about alternative text, and it says every image button must have alternative text. So the WCAG has provided this very clear, easy to use rubric. It's built around these. Let me actually change my screen. Sorry about that. The WCAG is actually built around these 4 principles. The idea that all content is perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So you may hear that acronym of POUR. These are not actually testable in a perceivable, operable, understandable, or robust. I can't go out and say a product is perceivable or a product is operable. What I can do is look at individual success criteria and say, yes, a product meets this success criteria or does not meet this. You look at it based off of each individual success criteria and whether or not it does or does not meet those standards. So that is really when we look at the WCAG, and let me go back. Are we going to go back to the slide I skipped? When we look at this, the advantage of the WCAG over 508 is that it is really a stable entity. Now, I say it's stable, but then we go from 2.0 to 2.1. And when we look at what WCAG 2.1 did, and the reason that it's important, it's really easy to understand. Technology does not stay the same. We're always evolving. And with technology changing, the standards actually have to change to meet changes in technology. So WCAG 2.1 does not replace 2.0, it actually expands and enhances on 2.0. The easiest one that I can really sell to an educator is mobile devices. When 2.0 was really rolled out, there wasn't a lot of standards on mobile interface. Well, 2.1 introduces some very essential standards, one of which is it's a reflow standard. If you've ever gone to a website on your phone and had both horizontal and vertical scrolling, can you really ever get all that information at the same time? And you can't. The idea is that if a site is built or a resource is built properly, it's single stream. So you should only have vertical scrolling. You should not have both horizontal and vertical scrolling. The other one that they included is the orientation. I mean, every touch phone or every tablet nowadays can be turned portrait or landscape. Well, does the page adjust to that change? Again, there is a little gray area because there are some programs that have to be run in a specific layout, but the idea is to enhance and really build in that ability to change your tablet from portrait to landscape to provide more or less space. And the other area is color contrast for low vision. 2.0 did not have anything to do with graphs. And I'll actually show you an inaccessible graph in a minute. And there's some in my second video that I go over. But when I look at graphs, I always tagged it, because I'm a history person, social studies, I tagged it as content. Graphs are content to me. There's actual information on them. Well, I actually had vendors that would argue with me that, well, that's not content, that's a graph, that's an image, there's no standard on that. Well, 2.1 put a standard out there, said all graphical images now must meet 3:1 ratio on color contrast, foreground to background. You have to be able to tell the difference. Okay, makes it easy. And then there's some cognitive enhancements really centered around hover focus and movement. You know, there are sometimes, I don't see them as much anymore, but games where you have to shake a screen or move a screen, there has to be a secondary input. There has to be something other than the ability to shake a screen or, you know, tilt a screen to get to something. So that's why 2.1 is really important. The PowerPoint's out there, so there are resources on the standards. I don't expect anybody to get these on the first go. And really, each local school system should have someone in their central office that is looking at product, and we're working towards that. We had put out the call for points of contact, I want to say the week or 2 weeks right before we went to telework, and basically the world changed, and you know, we haven't gotten back around to it, but it is on the radar. So every school system should have this. Like I have a team. I was going to provide quite a few different professional developments to some of the local school systems over the summer. And of course, all that got scrapped because of COVID-19, but it's there. We're making those plans. We're trying to enhance that knowledge base, because that's the only way we can do it, is together, not alone. So I just like to throw these out because it's scary when you look at the numbers. Now, this is what I would call an inaccessible graph, because that white text on the orange background is not sufficient. I was not changing this graph. This is an image from a well-respected law firm, and that deals in accessibility. And it was kind of funny that the graph is inaccessible. But what it shows is that it talks about ADA website accessibility lawsuits in federal court over the last 3 years. 2017, there was 814. 2018, there was 2,258. 2019, there was 2,256. Yes, we went down by 2 cases from 17 to 18. That's not a huge decrease, um, or not 17 to 18, from 18 to 19. And the graph is labeled wrong. I should really reach out and tell them that it's wrong. But it's there, but you jumped from 2017 to 2018, 177%. And it stayed stable in 18 and 19. And they really expected it to stay stable in 2020. However, COVID-19 has again impacted court operations. So these are not being as rapidly filed. So what does this really mean to you as an educator? Well, people are getting sued on a daily basis. Um, I wish I would have wrote down the number a day. I think it was 7 per day is what the average works out to be. That's a lot of cases around accessibility. Now, most of them aren't in education or government, but they saturate the retail market for so long, and then they're going to go back and look at something else. So a lot of those cases in 2017 were actually, there was a lot of educational cases, especially with your higher ed. There are still higher ed cases going on today. Typically, a school system gets a notice from the Office of Civil Rights with the federal government, and you enter typically into a voluntary resolution agreement. So we never get to the case or the lawsuit part. Again, not a lawyer. I just look at these numbers, and it's scary. I mean, to think about 2,256 cases. Now, what does that equate to per month? Again, and I kind of like the numbers, but this is what's happened in COVID-19 down to 572, May 538, and you start to see the uptick again, 858. Do you guys still hear me? Okay. Okay. Because I got an unstable connection morning again. So June went up to 858, July back 954. So again, we're going to probably be right on pace to hit around 2,000, if not more cases as the courts start to address these. So even in this fully telework digital education stage, we're still seeing them. And what I put this up here, and I thought this was really important to include, because so many of our students now that have special needs are not getting the services they want. And I do believe personally that you'll see some of these numbers increase again as parents get into the school year and start to realize their kids can't function using a resource that a teacher designed to be used in a classroom. And it's just something to think about long term. Where's that number going to go, and what's the impact going to be from the school system? So, what's new in 2020 legally, and this is again why I say 2.1 is important. 75% of all federal cases now reference WCAG 2.1. Last year it was like 10%, 15%, a very small number. Accessibility widgets, which are huge on websites now, they think they fix everything. They're actually causing more problems than they're worth. And then 20% of all federal cases are focused on apps and app accessibility. Some of that is based directly to the Domino's case, which if you're interested, feel free to research Domino's versus Rebels. It's actually very interesting, but that's a whole different discussion. So now I'm going to open it up and kind of let you guys pepper me with some questions, and we can go from there.